President Trump's peace plan for two Palestinian states is kicked off by fuel trucks for Gaza. Israel will continue Syria strikes despite the S-300, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the Israeli Defense Force has demolished another Gaza attack tunnel that penetrated some 200 meters inside Israeli territory. Hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart. Welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Thursday. It's the 11th of October, 2018. And as we seem to say every day, more news all the time, setting the stage for what the Bible says will happen in the last days. Now, this first story is fascinating. We had it yesterday. I didn't get a chance to get to it because it deserves a little bit of time all of itself. It seems something has been unveiled of President Trump's peace plan that he hasn't unveiled yet, but something has kind of leaked out. And this happened the other day when fuel trucks were sent to Gaza, not by the Palestinian authorities or paid for by them, but by the Arab Gulf state of Qatar. And what it does is bypass the PA, the Palestinian Authority, because according to this article and according to a couple of other things we've read, it seems President Trump's peace plan will call for not one but two Palestinian states, one in Gaza and one in Ramallah. Let me go with the story. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu won praise from the U.S. Mideast negotiator Jason Greenblatt for letting the Qatar-funded fuel trucks go through to the Gaza Strip on October 9th. That was 2 days ago. This is because it was the first step. Debka File reports towards implementing the administration's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan, partner with Israel and Egypt, to eventually separate the Gaza Strip from Judea and Samaria, that is the West Bank, and to form two separate Palestinian entities. Isn't that interesting? While Israeli politicians still argue about the pros and cons of the aging two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, after decades of getting nowhere, Washington, Jerusalem, and Cairo and Doha, that's the capital of Qatar, by the way, are beginning to shape this widely different two-state formula. The fuel trucks are expected to be followed by deliveries of other essentials, as well as cash injections for the financially strapped Gaza population. Those aid consignments will not be handed to the Hamas-ruled administration, but unloaded at a UN-controlled facilities for distributing to the people under the supervision of the world body's peace negotiator, Nikolai Medvedov. As it begins to take shape, this process faces numerous pitfalls, indeed, shall we say. Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas, or Abu Mazen, is burning with rage. We had a couple of stories we didn't do yesterday about how mad Mahmoud Abbas is, but this story takes care of that. He is burning with rage, but he has not commented on the fuel delivery to Gaza, and is still more importantly, neither has the Fatah party, which he heads. U.S., Israeli, Egyptian, and Gulf intelligence services have begun to conclude that although he and his close cronies are still capable of stirring up the media against this new plan, his power to follow through is waning. Abu Mazen, again, that's his real name, his ultimate threat is to stop transferring all payments to the Gaza Strip, not just stopping payment of its electricity bills. It has been met with an Israeli counter-threat to cover the shortfall by diverting to Gaza all the monies collected for the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah. Although all the parties to this new U.S. peace plan are holding silent until President Donald Trump sets the dates for its publication, Debka File's military and intelligence sources have learned that certain Western and Gulf agents are in contact with elements of the Palestinian Fatah party to head off any plans to respond to the initiative for the new terrorist onslaught in Judea, Samaria, or in Jerusalem. A complication has also cropped up in the Arabian Gulf. Qatar, which is part of the new U.S. lineup, is also Saudi Arabia's bitterest enemy after Iran. Yeah, Qatar is the one nation there in the Gulf that is at loggerheads with the Saudis. And it's interesting how, even though they're geographically next to each other and all the rest of the nations fall in line, Qatar and the Saudis are at loggerheads here. And so this is one of the problemos we have here. Okay, so they're the biggest adversary, although both are close allies of Washington. Now, that may change with another story we have about the Saudis later. Nevertheless, the U.S., Egypt, and Israel decided to take a chance and leave the Saudis out of their Middle East peace initiative. President Donald Trump's angry outburst on October 7th, Saudi Arabia and its king would not last 2 weeks in power without American military support, is tied with this complication. It also finds the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, that MBS, that's the new young leader there. His star is dimming at home, and the oil kingdom's falling into economic decline. And he's declining internationally too, as we will see with the murder of the Saudi journalist that took place in the Saudi embassy there in Turkey, which is a whole other can of worms for MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. So anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to get off track here. But so interesting, they bypass the Saudis here. They get Qatar, who had loggerheads with Saudis, to put the money up, pony it up, so they have this fuel delivered to Gaza, bypassing the Palestinian Authority. All right. So anyway, the U.S. sees Qatar as the key to bringing Turkey aboard in the peace plan, despite its difficult relations with Israel. Trump's new advisor for Syria, James Jeffrey, has been assigned with restoring good relations between Ankara and Washington, while also mending its diplomatic and security fences with Israel. The co-architect of this new U.S.-Israeli-Palestinian peace plan, President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, won unusual kudos on Tuesday, October 9th, from Nikki Haley in her comments at the White House upon quitting the post of the U.S. ambassador to the UN. She said, Jared is such a hidden genius that no one understands. When I've done working with him on the Middle East peace plan, it is so unbelievably well done. So here's what it seems. We're going to get a little bit of insight of what President Trump is thinking outside the box. Because remember the situation. Let's explain the geography. The north of Jerusalem is Ramallah, a few miles to the north. South, way down at the border there, is the Gaza Strip. Between Ramallah, the so-called West Bank, and Gaza, you've got territory there that is occupied, or it's not occupied, it's lived in by Israelis. So there's no connection between these two geographical entities. So how can you have a Palestinian state when there's no connection there? Now, one of the things been arguing over the years that Israel gives up this territory in between, and the two parts are connected, and there you go, voila, a Palestinian state. But that'll never wash, because the authority has to be, the security authority has to be under the control of Israel to stop terrorist attacks. So they would never allow that. They would only agree to that if the Palestinians would A, disarm, and B, the Israelis would be there as the security force in control of this new entity. And the Palestinian Authority says no. And so what's come here, this is very fascinating idea, what's come out of the box now, is let's do not one state, but two different ones, one in Gaza, one in Ramallah, and let them each be independent, call themselves whatever they want. But what that doesn't do is give any capital in Jerusalem. Jerusalem remains the capital of Israel. Now, that's probably not going to fare well with many people, but it seems that's what Egypt's come up with. That's what Saudis come up with, Qatar, and also the U.S., and some more of its allies we see. We'll see what happens, but it's fascinating, isn't it, to look at that. So anyway, that's a story. This fuel delivery may be the beginning of Trump's new peace plan. Will it work? No, but at least he's going to give it a try. All right. Now, the next story, this is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says, all right, based on a story we dealt with yesterday and on Monday, of course, Israel will continue Syria strikes despite the S-300. Netanyahu tells Moscow. Again, let's back up and put this into perspective. Remember, the Russians have sent some 24 S-300 missile launchers to Syria to be deployed on their western shore towards the Mediterranean Sea to any planes that might come and want to do harm to any buildings in Syria. And as we mentioned yesterday, they're Russian-made. The command and control center is actually in Moscow for these planes and the radar. But the people manning the Russian launchers there will be Iranians, of all people. So Iran's had this S-300 for 2 years with its own anti-aircraft defense there in Iran. So evidently they're bringing some of these people who've been trained from Iran over there to be in Syria to be manning this S-300 anti-missile defense system. So if the Israelis would, do an attack again on some building in Syria that they believe is housing some type of chemical or nuclear weapon or just some advanced tactical weapon, then Syria would fight back. But interesting, not with Syrians, not with Russians, with Iranians using Russian hardware. Now, what Netanyahu said Tuesday, and he just revealed it today, is Israel's going to continue the strikes. This is one of the questions we ask. Are they going to continue the strikes if they find something untoward there in Syria, as they often do? Well, Netanyahu said yes. All right. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today that he told Russian Vice Premier in talks on Tuesday that Israel must continue to hit hostile targets in neighboring Syria, despite Moscow's decision to equip Damascus with advanced air defense missiles. Netanyahu said at a press conference that he told Maxim Akimov in talks in Jerusalem that Israel would continue to fight what it says are Iranian attempts to entrench itself militarily in Syria and channel advanced weaponry to its Lebanese ally, the Hezbollah terrorist group. Like we said, the reason that building was destroyed, these weapons were meant for Hezbollah, which is a terrorist group, a proxy of Iran, and they are next door in Lebanon. So the idea was they were snuck into Syria, the northern part of Syria. They would be trucked down or brought down some way to southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah would have them. That didn't happen because Israel destroyed the building and the weapons. Despite the delivery of the S-300 air defense systems to the Syrian military, Israel was committed as a matter of self-defense to continue its legitimate activity in Syria, Netanyahu said, against Iran and its proxies, which state their intention to destroy us. Now, they're very forthright with it, very vocal. Yeah, they want to destroy Israel. There's no question about that. Israeli planes have literally carried out hundreds of strikes in Syria against what it says are Iranian and Hezbollah targets. But there have been no reports of suspected Israeli airstrikes since the accidental Syrian downing of a Russian plane during an Israeli airstrike in Syria, an incident that raised tensions between Israel and Russia. 15 Russians were killed in the September 17th incident that Moscow blamed eventually on Israel, accusing its pilots of using the larger Russian plane as cover. Israel, of course, disputed the Russian findings and said its jets were back in Israeli airspace when the planes were downed. In response, Moscow announced new measures, like we mentioned, to protect its military in Syria, equipping Damascus with S-300 air defense systems. So this meeting now was the first public sit-down between a senior Russian official and Netanyahu since the incident. Russia and Israel have set up a hotline since 2015 to avoid accidental clashes in Syria, but the new measures have led to concern among Israelis that their strikes will now be limited there. So he met Akimov on the sidelines of a bilateral economics conference that he believed that the current dispute with Moscow would be resolved. I think that with common sense and goodwill, we can come to a solution that will allow the continuation of the good coordination between the Russian and Israeli militaries. At the weekly cabinet meeting on Sunday, Netanyahu said he would meet Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin soon to discuss the coordination. The leaders have spoken 3 times by phone since the September incident, and both Iran and Hezbollah, which are enemies of Israel, are supporting Syrian President Bashar Assad's regime in his country's civil war alongside Russia. So again, we see Netanyahu is trusting Putin, that Putin understands what he is saying, and of course he's going to go along with it. So we ask the question, then why in the world would Putin allow Iranians to be the ones manning these anti-aircraft systems there in Syria if an Israeli plane is on the horizon? So you can imagine an Israeli plane's on the horizon. They're running the anti-aircraft system there, on the border there, the northwestern border there of Syria, and they see an Israeli plane who's starting to shoot towards Syria. Of course, they're going to shoot back, and these are Iranian, remember, not Russian people manning that. So. I don't understand Prime Minister Netanyahu's thinking there, why he continues to trust the arm of flesh, Russia, over and over again. They have let them down. They will continue to, because we know this from the Bible. Russia will be one of those countries that ultimately invades Israel in the last days. And this is what we've been talking about over and over again. The war, or not much of a war, it's an invasion, that basically ends with the destruction of this army coming from the north, south, east, and west. The destruction by the God of heaven doing this. And so that's in the future for Russia. And the stage is being set now, of course, for that to happen. So what we see now here is Prime Minister Netanyahu still relying on the arm of flesh. I got a story down in the list I won't get to. See if I can find what it's called. Basically, the story says, there's no free lunch with Russia. In other words, if they do something for you, you got to pay them back with something. But the trouble is, Russia keeps double-crossing Israel. They've done this time after time after time. And the ultimate double-cross is revealed in Scripture, which will happen with this invasion that takes place sometime in the future. All right, we talked about UNESCO. Remember that yesterday and Monday? The United Nations, what's it called? Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. This most anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli organization that you can imagine. Over the years, they've done many, many things, many resolutions that have been against Israel, against the people of Israel, against the United States too, but particularly Israel they pick on. Anyway, here's an interesting story, an interesting take of what we talked about yesterday. Remember, UNESCO came up with a resolution that said, the Machpelah, that's in Hebron, that is the burial place of the patriarchs, where you've got the patriarchs and their wives buried, all right, Abraham, Sarah, etc. That is now called what we call occupied territory, according to UNESCO, as is Rachel's tomb. And Rachel, of course, was the beloved wife of Jacob, where she was born, she died someplace near Bethlehem, where her tomb is there. That's also called occupied territory, according to this resolution that was, passed yesterday by UNESCO. So here's the headline by an Israeli organization that was very clever. It says, UNESCO's war on Jewish mothers. That will catch anybody's attention, did mine. UNESCO has passed several resolutions attacking the connection between Israel and the Jewish holy sites. But this week, the executive board passed 2 new resolutions aimed specifically at the biblical matriarchs. One rabbi sees this as a continuation of the biblical battle between Isaac and Ishmael, and a closer look shows how this is nothing less than an after-the-fact attempt to block the Jews' return from exile. On Wednesday morning, the PX Commission, composed of 59 members of the Executive Board of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, adopted resolutions 28 and 29, titled Occupied Palestine. The resolutions state that the Machpelah, that's the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, and Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem are an integral part of the occupied Palestinian territory. The resolutions were sponsored by Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Morocco. The stated motive behind the resolutions was to encourage negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. UNESCO's Assistant Director General for External Relations, Nicholas Kasanides, try and pronounce that correctly, said at the meeting that the resolutions enhance, quote, the spirit of constructive dialogue to enable us to reach a consensus. Rabbi Simcha Hochbaum, a resident of Hebron and tour guide, stated that the real basis of the UNESCO move was not a political conflict, but was in essence, quote, an ongoing spiritual war between the Jews and the Arabs based in the Bible. The battle is over the connection to Abraham, as described in Genesis, Rabbi Hochbaum told Breaking Israeli News, citing a verse in Genesis there where God told to Abram, don't be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. It is through Isaac that your offspring shall be continued for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed. And that, of course, is Ishmael. And so what the promise is, according to Genesis 21, 12 to 13, which is quoted here, Isaac is the promised seed. Isaac is the favored son because he came from the husband and wife, Abraham and Sarah. Ishmael was the product of Abraham and Hagar, the slave girl. Ishmael had his own, prophecies and promises. Great nations would come from him. But the promised line and the promised seed is the favored son was, of course, Isaac. This is disputed by Islam, of course. They say it was not. In fact, on Mount Moriah, when Abraham took his son to sacrifice, it wasn't Isaac. There was actually Ishmael, because Ishmael was the promised son. So in essence, they rewrite the story of the Bible. So what this tour guy said is exactly right. The battle is about the Bible, what it says. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe what the scripture says, that Abraham's promised son was Isaac, or what Islam says, that Abraham's promised son was Ishmael. And so by saying this is occupied territory, that is the Machpelah, the burial place of these patriarchs, and Rachel's tomb, of course, which was the wife of Jacob, one of the patriarchs, on the Israeli side, of course, who, you've got Isaac, and then, Jacob was his son, but according to the Palestinians and, Muslims, that this would not be part of the promised line, because the promised line comes Ishmael and his descendants. Bottom line is this, that it is a spiritual problem. It's very interesting insight there. This is the issue, trying to wipe out the history of Israel by going to two places there, which you have mothers of Jewish, children who became the patriarchs of Israel, of course. Sarah, the mother of Isaac, she's buried there at Machpelah, and Rachel being buried there near Bethlehem. So the bottom line was, it is a battle, literally it's a battle against the Bible, a battle against what God's Word says. And so it's very significant, these resolutions, like he said, more interesting than this is the timing of it. They come 3 weeks before the Jews around the world would read the portion of the Torah describing Abraham's purchase of the Machpelah, the first acquisition of land in the Promised Land. And every year, tens of thousands of Jews fill Hebron for the Sabbath to commemorate the purchase. Because if you recall, the Bible says in Genesis 23:16, Abraham accepted Ephron the Hittite's terms. He bought the Machpelah to be a burial place first for his wife Sarah, then of course himself. The other patriarchs are also buried there. It was the first purchase of land in the Holy Land to show that, this is you put your tomb there because this is our property. This is our land and our descendants. And who is buried there? Not Ishmael, but Isaac, of course, is buried there. And so this is the whole problem what we've got with the Machpelah there. It's the tomb of, the patriarchs, not the tomb of the non-promised son, Ishmael. And so, again, what we said the other day is so important. Nikki Haley is stepping down. We mentioned that on yesterday. It was the big story Tuesday, as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Very outspoken, very eloquent, a very strong, staunch defender of Israel. We've never had anybody even near as good as her. She's going to be gone by the end of the year. Who's going to take her place? And who's going to stand up against nonsense like this from the United States? Will the mouthpiece be as loud, be as clear, be as forthright, or will it be somebody who kind of fades into the background and is more diplomatic than Nikki Haley was? We need a fighter like Nikki Haley. We don't need, a diplomat that says, it tries to agree you've got a good point here or there. They don't have any good points whatsoever. The Bible basically makes it clear the promised son was Isaac. Okay, so that's a fascinating story. So Israel's war on the matriarchs. There's another UNESCO story which I thought was interesting. It said it got the Israelis and Palestinians to work together. And the Israeli ambassador, that's nonsense. That's not exactly the word he used, but I'll use the word nonsense in place of what word he used. Okay, UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization was busy patting itself on the back on Wednesday for supposedly fostering genuine compromise between Israel and the Palestinians. But Israel's top diplomat at the United Nations insists this was no cause for celebration, that the Jewish state was still intended to quit UNESCO at the end of the year. The new head of UNESCO, Frances Audrey Azoulay, has made a determined effort to strike a less strident anti-Israel tone. UNESCO, like so many other UN bodies, has for decades been hijacked by the Arab and other non-aligned and transformed into little more than a podium for which to bash the Jewish state. In fact, that's kind of what they exist for, just to bash the Jewish state. For this reason, both the U.S. under President Donald Trump and Israel declared earlier this year they're going to withdraw from UNESCO. Azoulay said she hoped this week's purported compromise would cause Israel to reconsider that decision. However, the achievement she touted was less than a compromise. It was more like an act of blackmail than a facade behind a facade of phony goodwill. For years, UNESCO has routinely read and approved a resolution titled Occupied Palestine that redefines historical Jewish holy sites as integral parts of the occupied Palestinian territory. Included in the list of the sites are Rachel's tomb, which is on the outskirts of Bethlehem, and the cave of the patriarchs of the Machpelah, where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah are buried there in Hebron. It should also be remembered that Hebron was the first capital of David's kingdom. Yeah, that's a good point. Remember, David ruled in Hebron for 7 years before he moved the capital to the city of Jerusalem. Hebron, hugely important in the history of the nation. Again, the burial plot for the cave of the patriarchs showing this, buying the land, showing this is the land we're purchasing because this is the land God promised. David sets up his kingdom first in Hebron there, again, to show the importance of that. But the United Nations Educational, Scientific, whatever it's called, cultural organization, UNESCO, says, no, that is Palestinian territory. And of course, as we've talked about here over and over again, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. These people do not exist. They're a created people done in about 1964 after the 1948 War of Independence there. The people that were there at the time of the War of Independence had been there just a year or two. They were migrant workers from other countries. Yasser Arafat, who was, fought the cause for the Palestinians, talked about being born in Jerusalem, and this is his home, his territory. Arafat was born in Egypt. These people came from other parts of the Middle East to work there, and when they, left with the War of Independence in 48, and Israel was seen as the underdog there, all these nations attacking them and again fighting off all these nations. Israel was the underdog and the world, showed some respect for it. So what happened was, along with Russian help and Yasser Arafat being trained by Russian, security services, decided to make an underdog, more underdogish, if that's a word, than Israel, because you've got these poor Palestinians there who Israel is treating horribly. So Israel, yes, okay, they've fought off these other nations, but in doing so, they threw these people out of their own homeland that they've lived in from time immemorial, namely the Palestinians, and therefore the cause of the Palestinians has been promoted since that time. Again, historically inaccurate, absolute nonsense, but the world has accepted this lie over and over again. And so what we have here is UNESCO attempting to say that the Israel signed on to this agreement that was there about the Cave of the Patriarchs, and Rachel's tomb is Palestinian, occupied Palestinian territory, which they said, no, it's nothing of the sort. What we did, we agreed, we signed on. If you put it not in a resolution, but you put it in like an addendum, okay, we'll take that, but we will not accept the fact it's a resolution there. And supposedly that was a sign of goodwill between the two parties. It was blackmail. In other words, look, we're going to either put it in the main body of the resolution or we'll put it in an addendum. What do you want? Well, Israel said, well, put in an addendum. We'll agree to that. Okay. And so Israel agrees to it. No, it was blackmail. And again, this is how UNESCO operates. So the good news is we've got about, 2 months, almost less than 3 months. At the end of this year, there will be no Israeli participation in UNESCO and no United States participation, because this organization has outlived its usefulness, if it ever was useful indeed. So another couple main stories with UNESCO here. Now, when we come back, we're up to the break now. Got a couple very interesting stories I want to lead off with before we get into, we start moving into Gaza and all the stuff that's going on there, because many things are happening. And that has to do with the evangelical Christians, their testimony in the support of Israel, a parade that just happened, the annual Jerusalem event, celebrating the Feast of Booths, Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, and an archaeological discovery that proves beyond any doubt that Jerusalem is the capital of the nation of Israel. All right, we'll be doing that in a couple minutes. Be right back. So as always, please don't go wandering off.
The War of Ezekiel. We are watching events unfold that were predicted over 2,600 years ago concerning the invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations. Who are the participants? When is this battle going to happen? What nations protest the invasion? What are the signs that indicate this event is near? Find out in this overview, The War of Ezekiel. Barry Stagner's powerful DVD, The War of Ezekiel, is our gift to you this month for any donation of $5 or more. Your prayers and generous support enable his channel to continue to broadcast the good news of Christ around the world. Simply go to hischannel.com, click the donation link, or send your tax-deductible gift to his channel. Post Office Box 25, Santa Ana, California, 92702.
And we are back with the second half of breaking news for this Thursday, the 11th of October, 2018. I'm Don Stewart. And again, we thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for watching this program, for watching the different programs on his channel. and for supporting what goes on here on this 24/7 Christian network. We are thrilled to see the response that is happening from people watching his channel from around the world. And one of the ways you can help us is by supporting us by the gift of the month. This month we have a gift that is Barry's DVD on Ezekiel. That was Dennis, by the way, I was waving at. He just came in. Ezekiel, the Battle of Ezekiel 38-39. This is something you want. This is really a product you want. Now here, let me tell you why. Because we talk about it from time to time, but we only mention part of it briefly. We talk about the participants, but we have so many other stories. This is not everything we do here. He explains it in detail what the Bible says, so it's something you really, really need. So this is our gift of the month for the month of October. So if you have a chance to support us that way, we would really, really, really appreciate it. Again, the gift of the month, and it allows us to do this program and other live programs here on his channel. Okay. Back we go to the news. 7,000 Christian evangelicals parade through the capital city in the annual Jerusalem March event is a headline here. The largest delegations were from, you'd never guess this, Brazil with 900 members and the Ivory Coast with 500 members, a figure which actually outnumbered the U.S. delegation according to the ICEJ. Some 7,000 evangelical Christians from more than 100 countries took part, along with thousands of locals, in an extravaganza of color and music and flags on Thursday. Now, this is a week ago this took place, in the annual Jerusalem Feast of the Tabernacles March. The parade is one of the central events of the International Christian Embassy's Jerusalem annual celebration in Israel. Dozens of national delegations assembled in Jerusalem, Sacher Park, resplendent in their national costumes and carrying their nation's flags. They wended their way through the streets of the capital down to the Liberty Bell Park, next to the German colony neighborhood. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago. Let me get my calculations right when this happened. But this story is very important. We'll talk about that along with the next and why. Okay, first of all, delegations came from locations ranging from the U.S. to the Philippines, to the U.K., to South Africa, and countless places in between. The largest delegations were from Brazil with 900 members and the Ivory Coast with 500. Now, that'd be a great trivia question to ask your friend. Where do you think the biggest delegations came of evangelical Christians to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles? What two countries? No one would guess Brazil and the Ivory Coast, but true, 900 and 500 respectively. The Feast of Tabernacles is a 5-day celebration for evangelical Christians which takes place during Sukkot because of the Bible's mention, the inclusion of non-Jews in the holiday ceremonies. During the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, the Jewish people were to gather together in Jerusalem, not only to remember God's provision in the wilderness, but also to look forward to that promised Messianic age, which all nations will flow to this city to worship the Lord. Pastor Ilana Cabral, who was born in Brazil and has been a U.S. citizen for the last 26 years, and a participant in the march, is in Israel for the 6th time. Eliana Cabral. She said she was supportive of the Jewish state because of the Bible's injunction to love the people of Israel and to hasten the coming of Jesus as the Messiah. We are supporting and praying for Israel because if Israel is strong, then it will help bring Jesus for the second time. We are coming because we want to bring the Lord, who is Jesus, to the people of Israel. Eunice Jones, who is also from the U.S., but originally from the Philippines. She said she was here by the grace of God and had come to show her love for the people, to pray for them, to bless them, and to join in fellowship with the people. Well, anyway, this is an annual event that's been going on for years and years and years and years. It never gets any headlines. Again, I've had the story for a while, but so many others have come up. But I thought, I'm going to do it today because we have one that kind of connects with this. To know this, that what they're doing is what we do here on his channel. We support the right of the nation of Israel to exist as Bible-believing Christians. Why? Because contrary to other Bible-believing Christians who see it differently, we believe Israel has a future in the program of God, that Israel is front and center in the last days in Bible prophecy, that Israel is God's timepieces we talk about so often here on his channel. The nation Israel, the hour hand, city of Jerusalem, the minute hand, the Temple Mount, the second hand, because events that are going to take place in Israel in Jerusalem and on the Temple Mount are center stage, ground zero, for events that will take place that will bring the second coming of Jesus Christ to the world. And so we look at Israel, Jerusalem, as basically the place where to keep our eyes on. Keep our eye on this as far as Bible prophecy is concerned. And so during the Feast of Tabernacles, as was mentioned, this is one where Gentiles participated. We see Christians, evangelical Christians, coming every year to march alongside and show their support for the nation of Israel, their right to exist. And we believe from the bottom of our heart that they have the right to exist. Now, having said that, we know they are in unbelief of Jesus. They need to turn to faith in Christ. This article, by the way, said something down the line that one of the things they're told not to do is proselytize. In other words, not to evangelize, the Jews while they're there so much as to show support of Israel. But I'm sure a lot of evangelism takes place where the gospel, the good news, is preached to the Jews about who the real Messiah is, who came 2,000 years ago, the person of Jesus of Nazareth, who died for the sins of the world, came back from the dead the third day, ascended into heaven, and what we talk about here every day at this time, he's going to come back someday to judge the living and the dead. Now, along with this parade that happened 2 weeks ago today, there is an amazing discovery that was just revealed day before yesterday. And here's the headline. Archaeologists unearthed a 2,000-year-old Hebrew Jerusalem inscription. The find is the first written evidence of the name Jerusalem, found on a column drum dating from the Herodian period, the time of King Herod, who of course is the Herod that built the second temple, the Herod that ordered the slaughter of the innocents. All right, what's going on here? The earliest written inscription of the word Jerusalem, written in Hebrew on a 2,000-year-old column drum, was unveiled on Tuesday at a press conference at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The limestone column drum that dates back to the Second Temple period was discovered 10 months ago on an excavation site near the International Convention Center in Jerusalem. The words Hananiah, son of Dudalos from Jerusalem, was etched on the column, which was part of a building that stood in a Jewish potter's village near the entrance to Jerusalem some 2,000 years ago. Prior to the discovery, the city's name was written Jerusalem or Shalem in Hebrew. This inscription was the first time the city was written Yerushalayim in Hebrew characters. The word Jerusalem or Yerushalayim was found on silver coins dating before the time of this column, but they were written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. Aramaic is a Semitic language similar to Hebrew. In fact, in the 5th century before Christ, the Jews went from writing, it's called ancient or Paleo-Hebrew, to use the Aramaic characters. They're the same characters that are used in the Hebrew Bible. For example, the book of Daniel has sections in Aramaic from chapter 2, verse 4 to the end of chapter 7, which was the trade language of the time. It's written in the same characters as Hebrew, but again, when you read Aramaic, you have to remember that instead of the word the, or which is attached to the article in Hebrew, it's attached to the beginning of the word in Hebrew, it's attached to the end of the word in Aramaic, so it's something you have to remember to do when you translate that. But it's the languages are very similar. If you know Hebrew, you can kind of figure out what the Aramaic says, in a large part anyway, not every word. But anyway, that's why it's Jerusalem, or Shalem in Hebrew, Yerushalayim in Hebrew characters. Before, it was written in Aramaic, but this is the first time found in Hebrew. All right. Now, details of who Hananiah was and why he etched his name on Jerusalem on the column has yet to be uncovered. However, what can be confirmed is he was Jewish. Okay, he was Jewish, and he is the architect of this. Now, according to Dudi Merovach, chief curator of archaeology of Israeli Museum, it is likely, he said, that Hananiah, was an artisan or the son of an artisan. Okay, and he also noted that Dudalos was not his father and was more of an homage to the mythical Greek artist Daedalus, and shows how the Jews at that time were influenced by Greek culture under Alexander the Great, which is true. Greek was this is interesting too. Greek was the international language at the time of Jesus. Alexander of Macedon, 330 BC, when they defeated the Persians, the Medes and the Persians, and Greek took over as the international language. Even when the Romans conquered the Greeks basically, Greece was still the international language, and it was the language during the Roman Empire. And so when Pontius Pilate would come down to Jerusalem to speak, he would not speak in the local Aramaic dialect or some type of Hebrew. He would speak Greek, the international language, because like wherever you went in the empire, everybody spoke Greek, so you could communicate that way. It's like today, the international language is English. It used to be French, but now it's English. Wherever you go in the world, you get the signs in the native language, and helpfully for all of us English speakers, you have the signs in English also, so you know what in the world this lettering was. So anyway, but it was interesting that he used the name Daedalus, which shows that influenced by Alexander the Great. It's also unclear whether this was a dedication for a public building or if Hananiah was showing his connection to his craft. These are questions which will help guide further excavations of the site. Now, what's the significance? This is the largest ancient pottery production site in the region of Jerusalem in the latter part of the Second Temple period, particularly during the reign of King Herod. The Second Temple, of course, is the one that was built by the returning exiles after the 70-year Babylonian captivity led by a man named Zerubbabel. A smaller version of the first temple, the Solomonic temple, the magnificent building that Solomon built. The smaller version when they came back, the exiles, but eventually Herod redoubled the size of the Temple Mount, built this magnificent structure. In fact, it was one of the 8 wonders of the ancient world on many lists. And so Herod, during the latter part of his reign, as this story goes on to say, the production was focused on manufacturing cooking vessels. There was ancient pottery production at this particular time here, and here we have this excavation of the site with the name Jerusalem. The location was based on its proximity to the relatively heavily populated city of Jerusalem and to raw materials such as stone, water, and wood, all used by artisans at that production site. Isn't that amazing? So the earliest in Hebrew, the earliest inscription, not in Aramaic, we had that earlier, but in Hebrew of the name Jerusalem, it was found revealed Tuesday. I thought that's interesting, and here is why. Because you have this drumbeat going on and on over and over again, that Jerusalem was never an Israeli city, that the Jews were never there in Israel, that is a myth. King David was never built, had the idea for a temple. Solomon never had a temple there. The Temple Mount is a Islamic holy site. And so mythology, according to Islamic mythology, is that there were no temples there. Well, here you go. Jerusalem, written in Hebrew characters there, found at the time of Herod. This column there showing that Jerusalem was written in Hebrew by Hebrew characters because the Jews were indeed there, and they did indeed build a temple there during the time, actually enlarged the temple during the time of Herod, built first by Solomon, destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC, rebuilt by Zerubbabel and his kin when they returned 70 years later, redoubled the size of the Temple Mount by King Herod. When in 20 BC, he convened a national assembly, said we need to do this. And even at the time of Jesus, it had not been completed. Remember in John chapter 2, when Jesus was asked for a sign, he said, destroy this temple and I'll build it up in 3 days. And the Jews said, wait a minute, we've been building this temple for 46 years, still building it, in fact, they would continue to build for like another 10 years till it was finally finished, and was unfortunately finished only a few years before it was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. But the Bible is very clear, there were 2 temples built, there will be a third one built, which we've talked about time and time again, built in unbelief of Jesus, unbelief of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's Messiah. And that is going to be ground zero, center stage for what the Bible said our events are going to take place in the future. So I thought it was a fascinating story to bring that up, because one of the things we do here on Breaking News is not only talk about events that have taken place, will take place in the future according to Bible prophecy, but things that have already occurred in the past, events that have already taken place that confirm the reliability and the historicity of the Bible. You recall we did a DVD called Ancient Bible Mysteries Solved, and we had that, is that Kanye West, by the way?
That's a live shot of Conway West in the White House talking to Donald Trump.
Oh, okay, good. Okay,
We're all having a good time.
Okay, good. Thanks you, Dennis. Kanye West. Now, this is great. You cannot make this stuff. He was in the White House. He just talked with Donald Trump. They just had lunch. Kanye West has basically been ostracized from so many African Americans because of his support of Donald Trump. And there they are talking together to a crowd. again, you can't make this stuff up. This is something that's tremendous. That God bless Kanye West and standing up for making America great again. Donald Trump. They're having a great time together. I can imagine there. We don't have the audio, but this is something that you notice they're all smiling and laughing. And the liberal press cannot believe they're having a good time because they don't believe there's any African American on the face of this planet that would support the policies of Donald Trump. But actually, there are many that do because they know the unemployment of African Americans is an all-time record low under President Trump, as is the unemployment of Hispanic individuals under President Donald Trump and his financial policies. So this is great. So Kanye going on there, and he's just, you know, he looks like he has the floor right now. They're having a good time, and basically what he's doing is showing the world that, look, you can be an African American, you can be a lover of your country, you can be a thoughtful person, which he is, by the way, and you can also support the President of the United States, and you can have a belief to make America great again. So that is good. If you're listening on the radio to this, you wonder what I'm talking about. It shows Conway. He's being very demonstrative here. He's talking with his hand. Must be part Italian here. He's using his hands to talk all the time. But anyway, he's you know, again, very well known. I don't know, was he most famous for being the husband of Kim Kardashian? I don't know about that. But anyway, Kanye is a world-class rapper, and basically what's happened now is he's been ostracized by many in the African American community, called all sorts of names, vile names, because he dares step out of the politically correct view and gives his position, his view of what Donald Trump's doing, what's good for America. And God bless him for doing that. So we love to see things like that. This is breaking news, and so we break it. Okay, thanks for that, guys. So anyway, let's go back now to, what are we doing? Oh, Gaza. Okay. Now, this is a story we led with at the top of the hour. We're just going to get our foot in the door here. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has demolished another Gaza attack tunnel. This tunnel has penetrated 200 meters inside of Israel. It is the 15th tunnel Israel has destroyed this year in the southern strip coming from Gaza, Hamas terror tunnel. It was a kilometer-long tunnel dug by the Hamas terror group. All right, here's the article. The Israeli Defense Forces on Thursday destroyed a tunnel that penetrated some 200 meters into Israeli territory from the Gaza Strip, which the army said was dug by the Hamas terror group using techniques meant to make it more difficult to spot by Israeli detection systems. The tunnel originated in the area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza and was part of and connected to a military tunnel network, according to the IDF spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. The military said it was the 15th tunnel destroyed by Israel since October 2017. In the past 2 years, the Israeli military has employed a variety of technological and intelligence means to find these underground tunnels with which Israel fears Hamas and other terror groups could commit attacks inside Israel, as they have done in the future, of course. They've used these tunnels in the past to attack Israel. The Defense Ministry is also constructing a new above-ground and below-ground barrier around the Gaza Strip. In order to combat these tunnels, it is due to be completed next year. Conricus would not elaborate on the techniques Hamas employed in the construction of the tunnel to try to avoid detection by the IDF. This specific tunnel, in the way in which it was built, indicates that Hamas is trying to challenge our counter-tunnel efforts. They're changing the way they excavate in order to make it more difficult for us to detect them, Conricus said. But we have different technological developments that allow us to bridge that gap as well. According to Conricus, the tunnel that was destroyed was not immediately adjacent to any Israeli communities, but was nevertheless deemed a threat to Israel. He said the military has been monitoring it for several months before the decision was made to destroy it this morning, Thursday morning. The spokesperson said the tunnel was a complex one with multiple branches. The tunnel had electricity as well as communications hardware and seemed to be of high quality. The IDF accused Hamas of investing in its network of attack and defensive tunnels at the expense of Gaza residents' welfare, which proves Hamas' abuse of Gaza population, for terrorist purposes. And here's where it gets real interesting. Let's stop right there. Let's agree to that. I think it's very interesting, or I don't know, poetic, that on the day Israel destroys this tunnel this tunnel, that the 15th one they destroyed this year, that's being built with the money that has been given to the people of Gaza to improve their lifestyle, their standard of living, which does not go to that, but the money goes to build these very sophisticated terror tunnels. It's the same Gaza now, which Israel allowed fuel to come in the other day from the nation paid for by Qatar with the agreement of the Egyptians to allow that to come in to bolster the economy there of Gaza. Well, the question is, will they continue to do this if Hamas continues to be a terroristic organization? This is the big question, and I think it's fascinating. We've got these two stories almost like, well, on the one hand, you're allowing fuel to come in that the Qatar is paying for, not the Palestinian Authority. They're not allowing it to come in, but to a Gaza organization there that's running a Hamas that is continuing. Not only, every Friday, that'll be tomorrow, on the fence, more, bombs being thrown. We've got more stories here we won't get to about, these incendiary bombs that are going across. They're hitting now Jerusalem again, the outskirts of Jerusalem in the city there. Another one was detected today. We mentioned that we've had, 3, 4 in the last week or so that are coming all the way from Gaza into the city of Jerusalem. One is actually on the outskirts of Tel Aviv now. And we said, watch out when that happens. So we've got that going on right now. And they're getting more and more forceful, more and more boisterous. On the one hand, they say, we don't want a war, but on the other hand, they're acting as though they do. And of course, they're still constructing these terror tunnels. So it seems like, 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4 here. What's going on? Well, we will see. And that is why there will be no peace. And by the way, as we look at the left of the screen, there's the Dow going down. The Dow, by the way, lost 800 points yesterday, and now it's about 250 points today going down. The tech industry took a big hit yesterday, and also Nike, which hallelujah for that. Nike, just do it. Ever since they put Colin Kaepernick as their spokesman, this anti-police, anti-U.S., whatever you want to call it. He's a failed NFL quarterback. His last year he played, he was like the worst quarterback in the whole NFL. No one will hire him. They're saying this is, how dare they do it? They're against this black athlete. They're being prejudiced here. They're protesting against him because he dared speak up for Black Lives Matter, anti-police, this and that. In fact, he wore on, if you recall, there's the famous picture on during a practice from the San Francisco 49ers, these socks that had a picture of policemen with pigs dressed as pigs, pigs dressed as policemen. And it was he wouldn't stand for the national anthem. He's the one that started all the sitting for the national anthem there. So Nike's taken it. It took a big yesterday. Couldn't happen to a nicer group. Many of us will not buy Nike products ever in the future. And so we don't know if Nike's going down the drain today as it did yesterday, but the Dow is going south again, which is very, very interesting. And the interest rates are up here in America. Something's going on. And we got the elections coming up in 30 days, and it depends what happens there. You'll see, the stock market either go way up or way down. Who knows these things, because nobody knows how it's going to turn out. So it's like we always say, stay tuned. But anyway, back to Gaza. What we have here now is the IDF says, look, what are you investing all this money? For $3 million worth of cement, $3 million worth of cement, electrical equipment, and hours of labor, this one tunnel, and all it was for is to bring terrorists from Gaza into Israel at the opportune time to kill and kidnap Israeli people. This is, what it's for. And Avigdor Lieberman, the defense minister said Israel will continue to fight the threat of the Hamas tunnels. The terror tunnel we destroyed this morning is another tunnel that Hamas will not have in the next war. Every day we get closer to destroying the weapon of tunnels. And earlier on Thursday, I didn't mention this story, Israel's military closed off several roads immediately adjacent to the Gaza Strip as it destroyed the tunnel. Also Thursday, if you got the little app that has the red alert, that went off. It was a false alarm. The Iron Dome system was triggered accidentally, setting off rocket sirens throughout southern Israel, although no rockets have been fired at Israel from the Gaza Strip. An interceptor missile was fired from the Iron Dome as a result of the incorrect identification, but there were no launches from Gaza Strip towards the Israeli territory. Now, it's interesting. One of the stories I got, you got the alert. Okay, they're firing some missile from Gaza, and the Iron Dome intercepted. So there's a story that said the Iron Dome intercepted. It's working just fine. Then to come find out, it was It was an accident. There was no missile fired, so there was nothing to intercept. They did shoot the intercepted rocket towards that, but there was nothing to intercept the intercepted missile. So this has been strange, because there have been goings on today, and this is a whole other story we got. There's a terrorist attack also too today on the West Bank, where one person was stabbed, one Israeli soldier was stabbed, one woman was injured by some shrapnel when they were trying to, I believe, shoot the terrorist, as it were. He's escaped on foot. And by the way, the terrorist that killed the woman and the man this last weekend has still not been caught. They're looking for him there in the West Bank also. So you got all these things going on. And so you had in Gaza today, it was really dicey, because you've got the Iron Dome, being deployed because this false alarm happened. You've got some roadblocks being set up, and people are wondering what's going on. And then the news of this terror tunnel being destroyed. Now, we were told by some news organizations these are two these things worked independently. In other words, they weren't related. Now, whether we believe that or not, we don't know, but we're just reporting the news story we hear. Because that unusual Israeli military activity today centered on the Gaza Strip. That was another headline we had, another story. They closed some access roads to the Israeli-Gaza border to traffic early Thursday amid unusual military activity focusing on the enclave. The day after, the fuel trucks drove through. The undisclosed IDF operation may trigger a fresh, and this is what's worrisome, a fresh Palestinian missile barrage, but it's not expected to quell the violent disturbances that Hamas regularly has on Fridays, and we expect another one tomorrow, on the Israeli border in southern Israel, which they've been doing since March. This is fascinating. We see this going on, but nothing major occurred except the destruction of the tunnel. And the red code rocket alerts were, the red alert code was sent. People hit the, to the places, the hiding in the cellars, the safe places for the missile about to come in, but no incoming missile came in. And again, here's the story. More incendiary balloons landed in Jerusalem today. While the IDF is operating the Gaza Strip, another incendiary balloon landed in Jerusalem on Thursday. That is the 6th. A cluster was seen coming down in the Valley of the Cross behind Israel's parliament and the Israeli Museum. It was quickly removed by the police. On Wednesday, as we mentioned yesterday, a balloon came down in the German colony's main thoroughfare, Emek Rephaim. Hamas's arson terror is spreading so far to areas far away from areas from the Gaza Strip. And so they're getting further and further with their terroristic tactics. And of course, this has got to stop. Well, what else has got to stop is me, because I am out of time here for this week. It goes so fast in this hour. So many stories, so many we get to, so many we can't get to because there's so much there. And that's the good news, because we see these events happening one after another in these last days, getting closer and closer to the time when the Lord comes back. The Bible tells us what the world is going to be like when the time of the end is at hand. And what do we see today? Exactly what the scriptures say, with Israel being back in the land, being center stage, being the spotlight of the world. The nations surrounding it are predicted in scripture, such as Russia, Iran, Turkey, as ones who will invade in these last days. So again, and the fact that this column was discovered, 2,000-year-old Hebrew, written in Hebrew, Jerusalem inscription. This is not coincidental. God is speaking to us. The question is, are we listening? Are you listening? Have you trusted Christ as your Savior? Because that's what this message, that's what this program, that's what this network is all about. Believe in Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, the one way to reach the one God. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until Monday, good Lord willing, we'll be back doing it all over again. Until then, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.
The War of Ezekiel. We are watching events unfold that were predicted over 2,600 years ago concerning the invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations. Who are the participants? When is this battle going to happen? What nations protest the invasion? What are the signs that indicate this event is near? Find out in this overview, The War of Ezekiel. Barry Stagner's powerful DVD, The War of Ezekiel, is our gift to you this month for any donation of $5 or more. Your prayers and generous support enable his channel to continue to broadcast the good news of Christ around the world. Simply go to hischannel.com, click the donation link, or send your tax-deductible gift to his channel. Post Office Box 25, Santa Ana, California, 92702.